ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bill Terhune. I'm one of the chaplains of public safety here in Thurston County. I'd like to welcome you here this evening. Thank you to our host for opening this up this evening so that we could have a place to do this training. Vivian and I realized that Vivian Eason is from emergency management, and it's emergency management that is hosting us this evening as putting things together. We've been fortunate over the last, we found out 12 years, of doing the faith community emergency management kinds of training that sometimes things change. How we handle our events, there's still fires, there's still that imminent disaster of possibly an earthquake. There's still, unfortunately, active shooter kinds of things going on in our society. And all of them have, unfortunately, a result that may be someone close to you bleeding. It is for that this evening that we are truly blessed to have with us Austin Lewis, who is an RN but is lead on a program that will teach us about controlling the bleeding even before fire and EMS could possibly get inside to be of assistance. Thank them so much for training. Austin?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Oh, and Mike. Thank you for having me. I might be louder than that. So I just want to also acknowledge that JD here, he's with Team Rubicon and also works at Olympic College as on their emergency management, and he's here to help train with packing the wounds and putting tourniquets on. So I wanted to say thank you because it's hard to find people to come on their free time to do these things. So really quickly, my name is Austin Lewis, and I work for a company called Trauma Trust. We are the level 2 trauma team for both St. Joe's and Tacoma General Hospitals. We alternate days. It is the only one in the country that does that. Logistically, it makes sense that you move a team back and forth. It's a lot of work. But we last year decided to get on the bandwagon with bleeding control and Stop the Bleed. And Stop the Bleed was basically started because of the Sandy Hook incident and a lot of other mass shootings and things like that. So I really appreciate you letting us come out today. So this course is called Beacon. It's the same course that EMTs nationally take for their bleeding control. But what they've done is exactly as the chaplain there said, have made it so that the public can hear it and then we can use it. If there's an incident or something happens right now, where's the closest fire station to here? Okay, so 2 blocks away. So they're going to be a pretty quick response, right? How long do you think it'd take them to get here?
5 to 4 minutes.
They're going to tell you 2. I mean, you know, that's how they're going to do it. But she says 4. Okay, how fast do you think someone could bleed out if we had a really bad cut? Minute and a half if it's literally a life-threatening bleeding. And if not, it can take 3 minutes to bleed out of a normal artery cut. So is that fast enough for the EMS to show up? No. So when you call and let them know that that's happening, what we're trying to do is instead of having first responders show up to try and save your life, you guys right here are going to become immediate responders. And that's the whole point of Stop the Bleed, is becoming an immediate responder so that things that happen like the Vegas shootings, the Ariana Grande concerts, or the things that are happening even locally here, you guys are there and you can take care of the people immediately. And then EMS shows up, looks like heroes because now the people are alive when they show up. Okay, so bleeding control basic. These are the people who kind of got together and said no more people dying from hemorrhage control. So we had it called the Hartford Consensus, and so the American College of Surgeons, which is the guru on all things trauma, the Committee for Tactical Combat Casualty Care, which JD here has been part of and I actually helped initiate back in 2004, and then the National EMT Association, along with the police, the FBI, the Homeland Security, they all got together and said, how do we fix this? And that's when this program came about in 2015. Okay. There we go. So the focus of the problem, or the focus of this program, is exactly what it said right there. It is about creating immediate responders, learning how to recognize what is actually needing immediate response, and then getting hold of the system and providing the care that can happen. So who in here's had first aid before? Okay, great group of people for something bad to happen. What's the first thing they tell you about when you find bleeding? What do they want you to do? Pressure, right? Direct pressure. We're not going to change that for you today. Direct pressure is still going to happen. It's the first line of defense. We're just going to add some tools while doing direct pressure. What's the other first thing before that that they really want you to be safe about?
Check your environment, make sure you're safe.
PPI, seen as safe, right? BSI. But basically put on some gloves and take care of yourself because we don't want another victim. So is anyone in here queasy? Hopefully not. The pictures aren't really as bad. I've even shown this to brownies and Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, and they all handle it pretty well because of the video games that are out there today, right? So I have no idea why it's going so fast. There we go. Not happy. All right, perfect. So they ask, why do we need this training, right? The first three right over there, work-related, home injury, and motor vehicle crashes. We've been dealing with that forever. That's something that we're going to deal with, and generally EMS is involved with most of those. But home injury, you're there first, you call 911, you save their life. But the mass shootings and the bombings, these are the ones that are now starting to scare people, that are starting to bring in the real necessity of this kind of training, because realistically, the odds of someone tripping, cutting an artery through that plate glass window right there are a lot less likely to happen. But now that we're adding these things into our society, we have to be a little bit more careful. So, ABCs. Everyone needed another mnemonic with ABC or an acronym, right? But if you just want to think of the first one, A, and it's really easy, is I've noticed something's wrong, I'm calling 911, so it's just alert, that's it. So you can kind of forget about the A, just alert someone if something bad is happening. B is for bleeding. So once you know that there's bleeding, it's life-threatening, I need to call someone, we find it, we have already called 911, and we're going to do what we said. What was the first thing we're going to do? Direct pressure, right? And then we're going to compress and apply pressure. Now there's certain areas of the body where pressure works better than others, or doesn't work at all, or things of that nature. And so we're going to talk about those different parts of the body and where to apply pressure or where to use a tourniquet and things of that nature. But what they're really adding to the direct pressure that is kind of new, that isn't what people have done in the past, and that is actually packing a wound with whatever you have. And so we're going to actually get a chance to practice doing some wound packing and with these models, and you get to pack and put your hand in there. And people freak out because I'm putting my fingers inside of a body now. These aren't obviously a real body, right? No one was hurt making these wounds, just so you guys are sure. Okay. No animals were tested on. So the point is we're gonna practice that, which is part of a weird thing, but it's what's gonna change your game on your direct pressure. Safety, that's all that they wanna push, safety. Be safe, you can't be saving someone else. If you're injured, you can't save someone's life if you're injured, and then you become a victim, and now we have another incident and this and that. You also have to make a decision ahead of time, right now. If someone came through the door and started shooting in here, first initial response to the normal person is what? What are we gonna do? Run, right? That's what we're gonna do. And then there's the people like myself who are like, oh sweet, now we can save someone, right? That's kind of the concept. But not what you should be thinking, right? And he's going to talk about it in the active shooter later, but they run, hide, fight, right? It used to be hide, run, fight, but he'll talk about why that has been changed, because hiding is only so good. Most of us have played hide and go seek. It really isn't that easy to stay hidden that long, especially when someone's looking for you. So basically, give yourself a chance to not have a bloodborne pathogen come in, and that's kind of what we're trying to do with using gloves and stuff. You may not have gloves. Anyone in here have gloves on them right now? I knew he would. So we have 3 out of 40 people who actually have that. Who in here has a tourniquet on him? Well, there we go. See, these are the two you want to know, because the gloves aren't going to save your life. The tourniquet's going to save your life, okay? All right, so we said alert, right? And we're going to test that belt theory. Whoever has a belt, I want someone to come and actually stop my bleeding with that belt. So, alert 911. That's it. That's all you're going to push for the A. B, we need to know where the bleeding is at, right? So that means exposing it. One thing that we're not teaching the public is expose the whole body and look everywhere. We're kind of going at, you see something bad, you go right to that spot, expose that area, and take care of that spot. As a paramedic or an EMT or something like that, we're taught to expose everything, look, do a blood sweep. But the problem with that is people get cold then, and then you run into other issues. So right now we're focusing on the injury at hand, and then if you stop that, if you want to look for more, you can, but realistically, the chances are the one wound that's the life-threatening is the one wound you need to focus on. So, if you can read, obviously you can see which are life-threatening, but without reading, what are some life-threatening things that you could think of that would tell you I should have called 911 or I should call 911? Spurting, right? That's the one. If I can hit you with my blood, that's bad, right? What else?
Soap bandages. Soap clothing.
Soaked clothing, right? It's leaking through. It's not stopping. Anything else you can think of? Loss of limb. I mean, that's obvious, right? When you see that, I mean, that's probably going to have the spurting too. Now, granted, most bodies, unless they're anticoagulated, have a natural clotting process, and you're also going to produce stuff that will shrink those vessels that get cut, and it will hold back the bleeding for a short amount of time. And then the pressure will kick up, shock will kick over, and then you'll start dumping blood. So it may look, who's cut themselves, looked at the cut and go, that's not bad, or that's really bad, and it's not doing anything, and then all of a sudden it just starts gushing. Same thing can happen in a wound like this. It can hold back the blood for a little bit, and then all of a sudden it kicks on. And then obviously the other one is, what about someone's mentation or how they're acting, right? So someone like myself who's always talking, if I'm laying there really quiet, it's bad, okay? Just know that. So if I'm quiet, check me for bleeding. Or sleeping. I probably talk in my sleep too, so. All right, so this video is not working, but realistically, this shows blood spurting from an artery, and then they show being able to pack that wound really easily with a 4x4 cloth and gauze. This is a pretty gruesome one here, but if you can see the picture, realistically, this is your kneecap, and this is your calf, and these are your tib, fib, just destroyed bones in the leg. But if you notice, it's not leaking anymore, right? Because in this picture where you don't see right here on the thigh, there's a tourniquet placed. So that tourniquet is doing exactly what it's supposed to do and allowing people to stop bleeding and get them to the trauma team and take care of them. So tourniquets work, they save lives, okay? All right, so we're gonna talk about where you can bleed from and how you would kind of do something about that. These are the 4 places, right? Your limbs, anything basically exterior of the body, appendage-wise, is something that can be controlled by a tourniquet, right? This is if someone says, oh, there's bleeding, this is where you want it to be bleeding from, right? Because I can do direct pressure, I can do tourniquet, I can do basically anything that I can do anywhere else on the limb and more. And so these are the easy ones to save lives. It's the most preventable. And you can do the direct pressure or tourniquet. Obviously that's a destroyed ankle, and the picture is kind of a little fuzzy. Then the next step, we have the junctional, right? The armpit kind of area, the groin area, and then the neck, all right? I know some of you probably have someone you wouldn't mind putting a tourniquet around their neck, right? This is not something I teach. That's you guys' own business, and there's 2 cops in the back who will hear you say it if you do, all right? Point being is these wounds will not be packed with a tourniquet. You cannot pack right there or there with a tourniquet. You can't get it in here, so the only way to do that is with direct pressure and packing that wound. So when you pack that wound, then you create more pressure and you'll be able to actually hold it longer. This is the last place that you can get bleeding from. Generally, this is where if you get shot or something happens and penetrates, you have these wounds. It may not look as bad as it really is because you can fill that cavity full of blood. You can put at least 1/3 to half of your blood volume in your stomach. So realistically, you can't stop that bleeding. So this is pack and go, transport, whatever you can do, cover the wounds and go. You just can't apply pressure on a soft cavity enough to stop the bleeding. So you can plug the holes. Tampons work really, really well for this. They just kind of stop that bleeding and plug the hole, but realistically you can't stop it. So they do an algorithm. It's in that handout that she gave you. I think it's page 13 or 14. And it kind of breaks down what the algorithm is for bleeding control. So first of all, we said, what do you got to do when you first get there? Ensure your safety. Then we're looking for that life-threatening bleed, right? We're not going to apply pressure unless we know there's bleeding, right? People don't like to be touched like that. You can be sued for it, actually, right? All right, and then we're asking, is there a trauma first aid kit available? Who in here has a first aid kit in their car? I'm going to pick someone out just on the way they look. He's wearing a 9-line shirt, so he's probably got something in his first aid kit. Who else? Raise your hand still. I want to see. Do you have a tourniquet in yours? You do? Okay. Raise your hand if yours is not really a tourniquet. You bought the first aid kit, and it was pre-made for you. So you can give me Hello Kitty Band-Aids, right? Some non-stinging alcohol wipes or whatever we got going there. If you bring that to me, I can't do much with it, right? So the whole goal of this class is to teach people that with the proper supplies in your hand, which is a bleeding control kit or a trauma kit. So now if he takes that kit and goes and buys a $13 tourniquet and some quick clot, throws it in there, he now has exactly what we need to save lives. So, and I have some cards for you guys later that have built-in really cheap pricing. You'll get hospital pricing on these kits if you decide to go that route. All right, so we're wondering, is there a first aid kit available? No, there's not, because generally it's not going to be there for you, right? So what do we do after that? We're going,
Look for what you have.
wow, it's going nuts. People are seeing this, right? It's not just me. Okay, I'm just making sure. All right, so we use any clean shirt or anything we can, right? That's why this shirt is right here. I can take my shirt off real quick, and I can take this shirt, and I go over here, and I pack that in that wound, and I just hold pressure. And I'm using whatever I got. But what if it's dirty? They're going to get infection. Do it anyways, right? She's got it right there. We can fix infection. We can't fix dead, okay? So the point being is get them to the trauma hospital. Let's fix that. They're going to get antibiotics the minute they walk through the door. It's okay. We'll take care of it, right? We love antibiotics in this country, so. This key word right here, steady, okay? Steady is the thing. Every time you release and pressure and do this and that, you mess with that clotting factor. So every time you release a little bit of pressure, you're allowing it to start bleeding again. So just that steady pressure. If you're tired, it doesn't matter. I don't care if you kneel on them. Do what you have to do to hold that pressure as long as you can. Most of us in here, after about 10 minutes, are gonna get pretty shaky, and it's gonna be pretty hard to hold that pressure. So an active shooter situation, the cops will tell you, generally about 15 minutes from start to finish before either cops assisted suicide, some say stats 20, but that's you of holding pressure for almost 20 minutes before someone's even coming in to try and help out. All right, so direct pressure. It talks about using your fingers or your hands. I tell you right now, if you can see the actual vessel that's bleeding, you know exactly where to pinpoint that, right? It's a cut in the neck. I know it's right here. I can use my pressure. That's better because you're going to get way more pressure with your fingertips than you are with a big hand kind of dispersing that pressure. But if it's in an abdomen or it's in a leg and you don't know exactly where you're pressing, if you press with just fingertips, you might actually be missing the spot. So that's why you want to put your hands. So I'm telling you, if you're doing a really long time and you haven't seen the vessel, use your hands. If you can see the vessel or you know it's going to be short time, you can use your fingers. All right, so this is an example of someone taking off their shirt. They found a wound, right, which means they did what? They alerted 911. Now they've noticed the bleeding, and now they're going to go ahead and take their shirt off. And one more, two more. There we go. So he's applying that direct pressure, and he's doing it continuously, and he's going to hold there, but he's going to hold it until medical professionals arrive. We're not going to wait. We're not going to play peekaboo with it. We're not going to go, oh, it's still bleeding. Just wait a little bit longer. Still bleeding, okay? Every time you do that, you reset that timer, okay? So, all right, now we have a first aid kit. This is when you're happy that you had your first aid kit. He had a tourniquet in his. You're happy that you have what you need and the location. So, where is the wound? It's on the arm or the leg. So we have a tourniquet. Yes. So now what are we going to do with that tourniquet? Apply it, right? We're not going to set it there. It's not going to do it itself. We got to put that tourniquet on. So, honestly, now you have a tourniquet in your kit, right? Do you know which kind of tourniquet you have? Is it this style, the cat? Nope. You got the SWAT tee? No, I got the black one. Okay. These are just training models, but the same one. So, okay, so he has a cat tee. Best self-application tourniquet out on the market, flat out. The military uses it. It's been used by everybody, and it's still the #1 tourniquet sold. And you're going to tighten it until it stops. It's hard to tell you. Some of you in here, I see a doctor in the front row. You're going to know where the arteries are at, right? So if you put a tourniquet on, you can tighten until you feel that artery stop pulsing. And that's obviously the best way, because once you stop that pulse, it doesn't matter where the blood is, it's going to be stopped. The issue is most people don't necessarily know where an artery is, and they won't be able to find it, and they won't feel it. So we say go till it stops bleeding, and then turn it one turn more, and then you'll set that tourniquet in place. This is obviously the same tourniquet he's talking about right here, placed right above the arm in that brachial area. And obviously, look, it's not bleeding, okay? Once again, tourniquets work if you use them appropriately. But it stops it, and it does prevent the person from going into shock, because realistically, we're trapping all the blood still in their body. This arm, I mean, if you want to look at it, would be dead if we waited too long. But realistically, the rest of the body is still functioning and doing what it needs to do. So, the biggest thing that people make a mistake on, apply it immediately. That's what you need to do. It's an immediate put on. Okay, if you think there's a slight possibility they need a tourniquet and you have one, put it on. We'll deal with the consequences later rather than waiting until they, oh, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. And that happens a lot, right? Who in here hesitates to call 911? I don't even take my kids to the doctor because I'm one of those dads, right? You know, get up, you'll be fine, you know, put some dirt in it. But that's not the case when it's someone else, right? So they tell you 2 to 3 inches above the wound, okay? So if JD comes up here real quick, since he's here, his arm is bleeding right here, right? My tourniquet, if I put it on, would be placed right here, right? What am I on when I put it right there? His elbow. So you do run into an issue, 2 to 3 inches could put you on a joint, depending on where you end up. So realistically, if it's easier for you, like us military guys, right? High and tight is what we say. So we go as high up, now he puts his arm down in the armpit right there, and then I would tighten it. It doesn't matter whether the cut is right here, 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 here. That's as high as I can go. And so I tighten that down and I'm gonna stop that bleeding. So whatever works for you, 2 to 3 inches. If you decide to go the 2 to 3 inches route, do not put it on a pocket that has like a cell phone in it. Don't put it on someone who's carrying a knife right here because that will stop it from working as well. And then on the arms, the elbows, all the joints. So just realize that high and tight just puts it kind of where you want it to be. They do tell you if it doesn't work, it's on the next slide. If it still continues to bleed, apply a second tourniquet higher. Obviously you can't do that if you go high and tight, but a tourniquet not working, I'm just gonna go out there on a limb and tell you it's user error, so tighten it some more, okay? So if it's not working, go ahead and just tighten it some more, and get it to work, because it will work if you tighten it enough. All right, so the reason that they have these up here, these are the military tourniquets right here, the CAT-T, stands for Combat Application Tourniquet, and then there's the soft T. Military, or police used these more than the CAT in the past, and now everyone in the fire department and most are transitioning over to the Combat Application Tourniquet 1. It's already in the city's, you know, pricing and things like that, but realistically, they work. There's never a failure. The one thing I don't like about a soft T is when you put it on your upper extremity, as you're tightening it, it keeps spinning, so it makes it really hard. So the only way I can do it is by putting my shoulder against something and then I can tighten it down. I don't like that. The CAT has Velcro inside here, so when I apply it, it gets stuck and doesn't spin around. So that's why it's such an easy one to self-apply. JD will test you right now. This tourniquet, I'll tell you why I like this tourniquet so much. It'll do peds and everything like that, but it is very hard to self-apply on an upper body. So that is why generally I say if you're gonna get a tourniquet, this is the one that I would have in my first aid kit. And then this one over here I just leave because it's fun to laugh at. So $30, right around the same price, $400. Imagine how many of these are being sold right now. I don't even know if you can buy them anymore. Basically, this is a blood pressure cuff. And who has $400 for a one-time use? So, all right, so realistically, this is where the belt comment comes in. A tourniquet, I don't care if, I don't get paid by any of the manufacturers to sell this. I only do this because it's part of my outreach and injury prevention. And I know that CATs work because we've both used them in the military. The point is that if you're gonna have a tourniquet, man-made, bought from a store, Amazon, Prime, eBay, whatever you're doing, it has to have certain parts to it. And the reason that is if you're missing one part, it's not gonna work as effectively as it could, okay? So what you have to have is, and the first thing it talks about right here, is a self-adhering band. Right off the bat, is a belt self-adhering? No. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but I'm saying it's not self-adhering. The second thing you have to have is some sort of a rod, something to twist and tighten it down, because the initial pull of the belt or the band is not gonna stop bleeding. You're not gonna be able to pull it tight enough. So you have to have something to tighten it with. Then you have to have something, up here it's called the windlass clasp. It catches the rod from spinning. So there's once again something else that you have to have. And then you have your strap, which is gonna prevent it from popping out or this and that. And then it's really nifty because it says you can put the time right here, because a lot of people worry about the time of when they put the tourniquet on. But realistically, if you can do it with something else, that's fine. The only thing I suggest is practice with whatever other device you're trying to do this with and make sure that it works. If we have time and we're over at the stations, I want people to pull out a belt or something. Just tell me what it is you think that you could do. I taught a class over at Riverside Fire, and we basically took a break for about 5 minutes and everyone kind of ran and got supplies that they thought they could do it with. Belt failed, right? And he thought he could. And then a spanner wrench and some webbing worked. But it took some extra effort and finding the supplies. So realistically, like I said, if you have a tourniquet available, this is gonna be your best bet. If you're gonna do it with some sort of a man-made object, you need to practice with it. Boston Marathon had 27 people injured with obviously life-threatening bleeding. 24 of them had a tourniquet placed. All of them were man-made. They did live, so it was beneficial, but Harborview will tell you that when you go like to phlebotomy, right, and they put a tourniquet on your arm to draw blood, what are they trying to draw blood from? An artery or a vein? Vein. So the artery that band they're putting around your arm is only doing, superficial venous bleeding. Same scenario was happening at Boston. That can also let your artery blood down into the cavity and then not let the venous flow back up in. So then you start to build that compartment syndrome, which can actually make it sicker, and basically that's where some of the issue comes from. So I don't care what you use. I prefer if you'd get one of these for your kits or on the walls or wherever you kind of go. We're working on that for all of our facilities, but it does need to have these parts, and it can be something else. A cravat, a carabiner, duct tape, you can make some pretty cool stuff with it. You just have to practice. All right, so I'm gonna flip through these, but realistically, it's a lot better to actually just show you hands-on than reading it from a slide, because I want you to feel what it's like to actually do a thing. But realistically, I'm gonna have him come up here. Can you guys hear me loud enough if I talk like this for a second? All right, so he comes up, we have the tourniquet, okay? Tourniquet is gonna come all packaged up. I tell you, if you're gonna have a tourniquet in your kit, open it up. It doesn't matter if it's out of its plastic. The nice thing about a cat tourniquet is no expiration date, period. That's kind of nice, right? None of us want to, turn things in. Unless you leave it in the front windshield of your car and it starts to fade, now you've basically compromised everything. So keep it in your first aid kit and it's fine. The reason I tell you to open it up is this is going to come basically Velcroed closed, and it's going to be like this. And when you open it, it's going to be, then you're trying to figure it out. So if you open it to practice with it, don't ever practice with your own tourniquet, because it's a waste of your tourniquet, because they're really supposed to be one-time use. You open it, I Velcro mine like this, and then it'll sit here just like this. And that's how I leave it in my kit. And it's open, and then all I have to do is open this up really quickly. I can go like this, I open it. So the first step was putting it on his arm. Cut was right here, so I'm putting it on high and tight. I grab the tab, I pull it tight, and when I say tight, that's tight like a compression wrap, but I actually want you to get a good cinch on it, okay? So it's cinched down, it's Velcroed to the Velcro right here. Then you have your windlass rod. As I twist it, I'm only gonna go 1 or 2 on him, because he already knew it was tight by the way I cinched it down. And that's what I want you guys to practice the most, because that's the failing point of most people putting a tourniquet on, is the initial tightness. I already have venous blood loss or pressure right now, right? He's not even, I could easily go put an IV on, and as a nurse, I'm kind of like a little excited right now, so. That being said, I could do a venous. Now, as soon as I start twisting this, he's gonna start feeling not only pressure here, but all of a sudden that pulse is gonna get harder where his artery is this. But I go, I twist, bleeding stopped, so I catch it in the clasp. Once again, even right there, it stopped the bleeding. I don't have to do anything else if I all of a sudden passed out from blood or whatever. I take this Velcro through here. The reason that is, if I catch this Velcro, we just lost all of our tension. So the problem with that is, and why they started pushing that is I get my first cinch, I go here, I've twisted until the bleeding stops, catch it, Velcro through here, top strap. Now, it's really hard to get it to kind of go the way it is, and now his is there. I can write the time on here. Why do you think time's important? Okay, that was the old tourniquets, okay? And the reason we'll go over that and this and that, and that's one of the things that we're trying to teach in this is we don't release the tourniquets anymore. What is released when you release a tourniquet? What? Okay, blood, right? And this blood in this arm is dead blood, right? It's got a lot of lactic acids and toxins, and it's just basically deep oxygenated. It's deprived of all of its nutrients. The cells are overdrawing everything out of that, so the blood that's flowing there it's dead blood. So when we get to an OR, when we release that, we're putting chemicals in to counteract all those toxins and that dead blood to make sure that we're not releasing and creating a septic situation. So realistically, you put it on, you tighten it, I think I waited too long to press the button. There we go. Okay. You pull all the slack out of it, and that's the key right there. Is if you can get all the slack out of it in the initial pull, you won't have to use a second one for failure, because I'm telling you right now, that's where the failure is. They don't get it tight enough from the start, and then they keep twisting, and they can't, and they run out of room to twist. So we adhere the band, we tighten it, we catch the band right there, then we come over through, we Velcro, and then we put the time on. So this would have been the video. So I'm gonna pretend right here, all right? So we just did JV's video, okay? So here's the video, we're doing things, we're putting it on, tourniquet's done, it's on, it stopped the bleeding. Now he's fine, because why? Why is he gonna be fine once I stop all of his bleeding? Because realistically, you don't need this arm to have brain function, right? He's normal as long as I can keep that blood inside of him, as normal as he was, right? So the point is, we put it on and it's working. Now, they put right here, improvised are less effective and sometimes they don't work. But the key is, if you are gonna do that, you need to practice with it. If all you wanna do is carry a cravat and a carabiner in your car because it's less expensive and you can have a lot of them, I will show you an amazing way to use it really quickly and easily, but you just gotta practice and be willing to practice. Bless you. Go ahead.
So, you're in Vegas, say you're at a concert, I'm not carrying I've got my thigh-high boots on and a whole bunch of new shoelace, right, or something, and you're saying, you're understanding that homemade is ineffective, yet if you've got an arterial bleed, somebody next to you just got shot, and I want to do some MacGyver, I'm going to stop his venous flow, is inadequate?
If you're willing to pull that shoestring actually tight enough, you could get the bleeding to stop. If you know how tight you need to get it, it's not going to be just tying like a bow, right? It's going to be a cinch back, tie down, and some serious lashings, something that like someone who knows how to use knots would do. If you've ever tied a present, how hard is it to get the knot to actually touch the box, right? Every time you do it, it slides up, right? It's just the way it is when we tie a bow. So it's the same on that leg. So I could show you a couple of ways with a cinch. I'm still thinking of thigh-high boots, right, you guys? No, I was kidding. But the point being is, realistically, you got to do what you can do. And if that's how your mentality is, grab a set of shoelaces and practice. Show yourself how to do it so that you have that best way of doing it with what you carry. Because most of us don't carry everything in you. After today, there's no reason if you went to a big, large event that you couldn't carry a SWAT tee. I'll show you how tiny they are. But even in a woman's purse, you could carry it in actually this, what are the small ones called? Clutch, right? Okay, see, I'm pretty good like that. So you could fit it in a clutch right next to your ID and your credit card, right? But you're with a man, so he pays for everything anyways. It looks a lot like PT banding, and I tell people, if you had PT banding that was this exact same millimeters thick and has been tested to the millimercury of pressure to actually apply the pressure, then yes. I don't know what the band thickness is. I think you could probably make it work. No one else is doing it, so I don't know why that is, but this is a proprietary thing. So, if the bleeding is not stopped, they want you to go to a second tourniquet. Once again, please tighten the tourniquet again to see if it works, rather than wasting another one of your supplies. Odds are, if you only have one tourniquet, I mean, that's it, right? You have one tourniquet. If you're lucky enough to have two, but you have 3 victims, do you use 2 on one person? That comes back to, what are you going to do? So that's why I'm trying to tell you. If you don't have enough tourniquets, use a tourniquet like it's supposed to be and tighten it.
What do you do with the very obese?
Okay.
You're outside in Las Vegas at a concert.
You're outside in Las Vegas at a concert. You're hoping. Okay, JD, come over here real quick. All right. So he's going to stand. I'm going to have him step in here like he was laying down. Step down. Okay, go ahead, put both feet in there. I know he's going to trip now. You can use my head to balance. Put your feet together, though. So that's a pretty wide thigh, right? If I got to like right here, and we're obviously on a big thigh. The cat tourniquet is designed to be able to do a pretty big thigh. And then the twisting is going to go there. You're going to have to twist a lot more because of all the adipose tissue. And you're going to go, and you're probably, this is true because I work in a hospital. They're going to whine more. Fat, for some reason, is very sensitive to certain people, and they're going to complain more as soon as you get there because you're going tighter. You will never go tight enough to actually cut off their nerves. You just keep going until the bleeding stops. Obese people is generally when they have the issue and they fail and why they put a second one above it. But realistically, the higher you go up, is it going to get skinnier or bigger? So really, your best shot is wherever you did the first one, because otherwise you're going higher. So cinch it down. If it's not working, cinch even tighter and crank that sucker down and go. I mean, go until, if this snaps when you're winding, stuff happens. They do not. They do not, and realistically, you saw how big that is. I mean, even on myself, I'm working on myself, but literally if I went all the way up to here, I could still, and that's a pretty good sized thigh, right? And I can still get that to crank down and get it to work. So, great question. And the reason why it's a great question is we're in America, right? So when you say, what about an obese person? Or it is an obese person. That's really more of the question right there, because everybody is. The nice thing is if it gets undone and you're having to put it on in a place, so come here real quick. So I'll have him lay down. He loves laying down. But I don't want to move his leg, or I don't want to do it, or he's in just a bad position and I can't get to this. We're in a car or something like that. You can take it apart. They've made it easier now. Obviously, they have a red tip, and it's solid, so it doesn't get caught on things and fray. They made this big enough. But the advantage is I can slide this underneath, and it's a one back. It's just one time back. It's not doubling it. So if it's here, and I go, it's just one time. It's not the backpack where you go through and then back through a buckle. It's just a one-time pull, and then I would have it, and I would go. Now his kneecap's right there, so I have to move it up. So I would move it up into his thigh. Now what I'm feeling right here is his wallet. His wallet would cause a problem if I was to tighten it down, okay? So I'd have to pull the wallet out and check to make sure he has any cash to pay for my tourniquet that I'm using right now. But I go ahead and I tighten it down and then I leave it. And if it starts leaking again and I'm doing something else, well, I'm just gonna come back. I'm just gonna undo this. I'm gonna pull it back out. I'm gonna throw another Velcro. I'm gonna go turn it one more time. And then I'm gonna go back about what I'm doing. And all of a sudden I see it bleeding again. I'm not gonna take it off. I'm just gonna throw another turn in there. So that's what you're gonna do if it starts to fail. And the only reason why I say that is we're already limited on supplies we have. And you're gonna have mass victims. If everybody in that Vegas style shooting at Jason Helding, thank you, at the Vegas shooting had gotten 2 tourniquets, how many people die, right? So they just came back and I think they said 40, I don't remember the number of people they said would have not lost this or that because of the thing. Our trauma doc says that's kind of a little unfair on that statement because literally there's other factors that kind of go into it as far as that goes on someone living or dying. It's not just a tourniquet. But when 40% of hemorrhaging traumas die because of some sort of blood loss, and if it's an arm or a limb and you do this, now if it's a wound in the abdomen or a head or a neck, that's a whole different story because we can't really get to those. So you can't say that bleeding and then you can't tourniquet it, you can't get to it. So if it's not stopped, go ahead and tighten. Great question on the overweight people. All right. Well, the next key points, it's gonna say, there it is. I want people to notice this. Who took CPR before 1999? I did. Okay, good. There's a few of you here. Do you guys remember back before 99 when they actually taught Boy Scouts and they taught people how to put on tourniquets with cravats or belts or so on and so forth? That was popular back then, right? In 99, everyone was freaking out and saying, oh my gosh, tourniquets kill people. They're causing limb amputations. They're causing this. They're causing that. Well, because of the wars we've had over the last decade, they've done a bunch of studies. 7.8% of people who would have died from Vietnam to now would have been saved using a simple bleeding control if it would have all been available and this data would have been there. So think about how many people that is from the Vietnam War to now, right? That's a lot of people. But the key is, and I loved it, this data because we talked about it. How long does it take for EMS to get here? Roughly 4 minutes. 4 to 5. She's 5. She's giving you guys a bad rap. How far to St. Pete's from here?
4.
So if they walked to the door, threw you on a stretcher, and drove out 15 minutes, right? It could be best. They're going to play on scene because they like to do their job. So roughly it's going to be about a 30-minute transport, okay? Nothing less than 2 hours has ever caused an amputation or permanent nerve damage. Nothing has ever, if a tourniquet is placed, not one, we're not even saying like 2 or 3 have, not one has ever caused an amputation or nerve damage. So that's why I don't want you to be afraid to put it on when you feel like it's necessary, because even if you're wrong and they get to the hospital, we can counteract the damage that is done from that trapped blood in there by treatment. So the point being is you will save lives by doing this. There is data out there for even longer, but the point being is even if you live rural it's still 2 hours. And so what? If it goes past the 2 hours, maybe we save the limb, maybe we don't. But if you didn't do it, they died, right? And nowadays, missing one limb is not the end of the world, right? They have, sporting, they have everything. The data's out there, the technology's there. It's not nearly as big of a deal. So just know that. Obviously, it's better to risk the limb than death. And don't use these to play with, right? If you ever want to, or you want to set up a play session where you want to show people, got a Boy Scout troop you want to do this with, don't use your own personal tourniquet. Bring us in, I'll let you use the equipment or whatever, and use that, because you don't want to waste your equipment, because they are one time. All right, so tourniquets hurt, right? They do hurt. Now JD's tough, that's why he doesn't complain when I put them on. And it does say right here, does it say it? No. I think it says at the beginning, they say don't practice on each other. We're going to practice on each other. I'm just telling you that right now. Now, I'm not saying you have to go till tighten to stop that artery, but I want you to feel the cinch, that initial cinch. I want you to feel how tight that needs to be so that when you get there, if you can get that done, there's no reason you can't stop bleeding with a tourniquet. So get the initial cinch, and then spinning is easy. So it's going to hurt a lot. It doesn't mean that it's on wrong, and it doesn't mean let's loosen it or take it off. Leave it there. Once the paramedics arrive, they'll give them some pain meds, okay? So that's kind of it. Also, what do you know if someone's screaming at you? It hurts, it hurts, it hurts. They're alive, right? They have an airway, right? If you don't want that airway, you just kind of let them bleed a little bit more, and eventually they'll quiet down, okay? Just shock is not a good thing, but it is a quiet thing. All right, so common mistakes. Not using a tourniquet when it's available, all right? That's a big deal. We do it all the time. We have first aid kits. I was talking to someone here who has a box of first aid kit in the back of his car, and we probably show up on scene a lot of times and we never use it because it's like, this isn't that big of a deal, right? Not making it tight enough, not using a second if needed. This answers your question here, periodically loosening to do that. The problem is you stop the factor and you allow that toxic blood back into the system. And then only a paramedic or a physician should loosen it. I really, really recommend that I want them to remove this. There's no reason for a paramedic to remove it in the field ever. It's just not. If a tourniquet's on and it's working, the only reason a paramedic should even touch that tourniquet is to tighten it more because it's bleeding. So if you put a tourniquet on and JD over here starts bleeding again, what are we going to do? Tighten it. Why would it have stopped the bleeding and then possibly start bleeding again? What are we thinking? Pressure goes up, right? Now he's feeling better. His heart's more efficient, right? Now the ejection fraction is pumping out that blood really good, and he's feeling better. So instead of shock, now his body is trying to get it back out to the systemic, and now he starts bleeding. So then the pressure's up, so we just tighten it. And he complains about the pain, and we get back into that situation. But then the paramedic's there and give more drugs. So, all right. But not opiates, because that's a problem nowadays, right? Some Tylenol, that's the way to do it. So, you asked your obese one, you asked yours. Any other questions right now about tourniquets before we move to wound packing? Yes, ma'am?
Why is it one use only? Is that for infection control or some other reason?
They damage them. I'll show you if you want to look at them. They start to get stretched out, and so they're not as effective. And webbing, anyone who's ever done fire, webbing is a very strong material, but it's strong in a straight length. They'll tell you in fire every time you put a bend or a knot in it, it changes the strength by half, and it kind of cuts things down unless you're doing them at better angles. So we're twisting a piece of webbing a lot of times around, so the strength is not in that webbing to handle that, so eventually they break. And what that leads me into is a great question. eBay right now, you can find these tourniquets on there for $3.99 to $13.99. It's $30 on North American Rescue. Do you think it's really someone has them out there for $20 less? They're fake, okay? The Interpol has a code orange out on them right now. They're trying to crack down on counterfeit tourniquets. Right now, the failure rate of a fake tourniquet is 20%, 1 in 5. So who in here has a family of more than 5 people? Is there one person in there you could pick that you wouldn't want the tourniquet to work for? She got it. And that's kind of my point. I wouldn't feel right about using even a fake tourniquet on you. That's just not it. That's not my nature. So spend the extra few bucks and have it work. Go ahead.
We're part of a disaster preparedness community in Jubilee. And,
Where's Jubilee?
Jubilee is in North Lacey. It's an over
Okay.
55 community, right? So
That's my kind of place. It's quiet and peaceful. I'm coming. I'm just young looking.
You are. But you got your clutch and your boots to go with it.
That's right, clutch.
So one of the things we talk about is maybe being several days before somebody can get to us. Do we use a tourniquet?
Absolutely.
And then what happens after 2 hours? So we don't have the injectables to help deal with that dirty blood.
They'd lose a limb, but they're still alive. We gotta go back to that. You know what I mean? Like it's life, limb, or eyesight, or beauty, right? That's kind of the rate we go into. So it's just, I would personally rather have someone missing an arm than nothing. It does make it hard, and it is hard to do that. You know, you can probably find documentation if you go to WebMD, right? Because that'll teach you everything. Loosen the tourniquet. I wouldn't for my family. If you end up in the woods and you need it, I would just leave it on until someone comes. For days, as long as you need to. I mean, the limb will eventually become necrotic, but at least they're not bleeding out. So, good question. So, saw another one. Question? Anyone? Go ahead.
You had asked, or you had started to say that we needed to put the time on, and you said, why do we put the time on? And I didn't hear you.
The 2-hour mark. That's the, yes, perfect. So they're looking at it. So if I put that on JD an hour and a half ago, they're looking at it and they're, okay, it's within that 2-hour mark. It kind of gives them the heads up that it's not nearly going to be as septic or as sick as it was. Whereas if they don't know a time, they're going to treat it as the sickest limb they possibly can, which means you might get some things that you don't necessarily need or want, but it's better than dying.
So it's the hospital.
It's the hospital, the EMS, the docs, the trauma surgeons really care about it.
You said Rite Aid stocks the real ones?
Not cat tourniquets, the quick clot. Now, so I gave you, and whoever didn't get a card when you're leaving, get a card from me because I have special pricing for you. Cat tourniquets, I can get, they'll get you a great price on that. I think I can get them down to $24 a piece from the $30. So you are saving money if you go online. Amazon does have this, and you can buy the right one from them, but it needs to say CAT, Combat Application Tourniquet, and there are people who are lying. I've had a conversation with Amazon on fraudulent ones multiple times, but they just can't keep people from lying in their ad, and they'd spend all day doing it. So that's why I say a reputable source. So these cards that we'll be handing out have 3 people that I've worked with who care about the Stop the Bleed program and getting it out there. So you will get hospital pricing on that. I mean, I have this kit, which is regularly $70, which comes with a cat tourniquet. Cat tourniquet's about $30. I have them down to about $38 on this kit. That's not tax, so I don't know what that means, but let's say $40 from a $60 kit, and the cat tourniquet's $30 yourself. So you can imagine what you're getting for that, right? So great question on that, and so that's what the time is for. And Quick Clot is a hemostatic agent we're about to talk about here, but they do sell that in Rite Aid and on Amazon. All right, so we didn't have a tourniquet available, so we're going to use a hemostatic agent. So we apply direct pressure. Okay, whatever. So the point being is we have the wound. See, I just had to walk away. So you have the wound, and we know that there's something that needs direct pressure. So realistically, I walk in, and he had gloves, but no one else did. I put pressure. I've got pressure now. Now it gives me time to at least start thinking. I may not be able to do the best stopping the bleed that I can possibly, but it's better than nothing. So now I'm telling him to go get his first aid kit, or I'm telling someone else to go get it. And they come back with Hello Kitty Band-Aids and some, sanitizer, and we're shafted. So then I take my shirt off, which, that is what it is. And we pack this wound as good as we can with this shirt. And that's still not going to be the best thing for it. The hemostatic agents that we're talking about right here, let's see if it goes. I saw something move there. And the reason being is if it's in a neck or a groin, just click the red on that one. Hospital computers, they're not good. All right, so the hemostatic agents, we have Quick Clot, we have C-Lock, C-Lock's Rapid, Chidoflex, and Chidogauze. Almost all of them that you hear the C word in it is because it comes from a derivative of shellfish. I don't know the process. I don't know how they make it. I'm sure it's a proprietary ingredients on how they do it. But to answer the question in here, what about shellfish allergies? Great question. Thank you for asking that. The point being is that they did an extensive study on about 400 people. They tested them. They actually had a true shellfish allergy, like anaphylactic shock style shellfish allergy. And so then they used, basically all these use about the same kind of concept of this shellfish derivative that they're chemically processing, but they packed the wound. Not one of them, not one out of the 426 had a reaction to it whatsoever. So whatever they're doing is definitely affecting the shellfish portion of it. I've never used it. Actually, I tried using it on a little girl. I coach soccer. And one of my girl's sister came over from softball and had gotten smacked in the eye, so she had a split forehead. So I pulled out some C-Locks, It's a $30 bandage for a $1 cut. But it was worth trying, right? It stopped the bleeding. I mean, I could have stopped the bleeding with pressure because that's not that big of a cut, but I figured why not? I'll pull it out and see if it works. So we applied pressure and it got it. She still needed some stitches, but you know, if she'd have been my boy, she'd have had glue, right? That's how that works. But like I said, life, limb, or eyesight are beauty, right? Some people need that nice eyebrow, you know, so. But the point is, this is going to give you your best chance for those ones we were talking about, right here in your armpit, right here in your axillary, or right here in the groin, or possibly the neck. And the reason being is this right here, if we open it, this has what we call kaolin. This one's by Quick Clot. It's the same as Combat Gauze, Quick Clot. They're all the same thing. But basically, this has a material in it. The blue line is actually for radiology, so if you pack it in someone's wound, they can find it later with an x-ray. But I can pack this in here. The advantage is that what people don't realize is I only need enough of this to touch the wound or the bleeding source, and then I can pack. So if all I had was that amount, like a 4x4 gauze or a small one, then I start packing the wound with a different one, and as I apply pressure, that's doing its job, it's creating it. It's about 7 times faster than normal clotting with the Quick Clot in there. Some of these out here, they talk about working with heparin and the anticoagulants. I won't ask, but I guarantee you in this room we have a few people who are on anticoagulants. This does work with that. So if you're a bleeder, you get banged on your elbow or something, having this around is a good thing. Ask me some questions afterwards when we're off camera and I'll talk to you guys about some other things. But these are out here. They're all within range of about, I think, this one because it's folded in a Z pattern, which makes it really, really easy to pack a wound really, really fast without having the roll fall out of your hand and basically do that. And you're like, oh man. So this doesn't do that because I can pack really fast. But it's $40, right? So that's pricey. So I can get the same one in the gauze, and that's on that same pricing I was telling you about in a roll like this for $16.99. So once again, I can do it just, I can do it pretty fast with this, and I'll be fine with that. I'm about saving money, but not just at the cost of a life. So wound packing 101, you expose the wound, right? So we have this wound. We're here. You can use your hand to rip jeans, right? You can use the scissors. Most of these kits that you buy come with a pair of scissors. So basically, this is identical kit here. You can buy it where it's a nice little zipper open pouch so that you can get to things. But I would open it, now I get this, I've got this, and now I'm cutting up. I open the jeans, and now I know I have a wound there. I go, he's getting me some packing gauze, and then I start packing that wound as best I can. If you get it packed and you pack it really, really tight and you hold it here and you're still bleeding out the sides, that's not really that good. One, it means you missed whatever vessel it was packing. What do they say in the old days? If the bandage is soaked through, what are we doing? Just place more, right? So we find more and we place it on right there. The problem is we're not actually getting to the wound problem, right? We're not getting to where the source of the bleeding is. So if someone shows up later and they have Quick Clot, this is the only time you'll hear someone say, pull the packing, get the Quick Clot inside that wound, and then repack on the top and give them their best chance at doing that. Now, if it stopped bleeding and you didn't have the Quick Clot in there and you're holding pressure and it's not bleeding, no, don't do that. I'm talking only if you just cannot control the bleeding and you want to give that person the best chance at making it. So we've located the bleeding, we did it. This is the picture I wanted you guys to see. Now it's going to go like 7 back. Video that's not working. I can go stand there again. There it is. Okay. So really what we're trying to get to, and this is the point, this is the old school, what they taught you in first aid. Just apply pressure. Problem is you have this whole cavity of vessels. It's not really easy to see right there. It's in your, I think it's in your packet. So there's vessels bleeding. If we pack down and get all the sides here, now when we apply that pressure, all the pressure goes out to all those vessels that are torn, all the wounds that are there. Anyone ever snowshoe? Okay, the whole point of wearing tennis rackets on your feet, right? To distribute that weight across the snow so that it packs. It's kind of the same concept here. We're distributing that weight in a different, the opposite. Or if you're like someone who likes camping, right? You put your arms down or your legs for the jack. You don't want to put it directly in the sand. You put a board underneath it, disperse that weight. Same concept here. Disperse the pressure out to all of the sources. But this is exactly what I was talking about. If you saw this wound and you knew that this was the only bleeding vessel, this is where I'd probably put my fingers in and just hold pressure on it because I could stop it. But if all these other ones are bleeding, you can't do that. So that's where packing the wound and filling it and then apply pressure. So when we go back and we pack with JD and we're in the back and you're packing the wound, I want you to feel without anything in there, because some of these wounds are unrealistically big, but we wanted you guys to have to spend some time practicing. When you push on it, you'll feel all that tissue missing. And so when you apply pressure, I want you to feel that. I want, once you've packed it, then feel when you apply pressure and feel how different it is, the way it pushes out and kind of covers that wound and things. Oh.
So I remember a war story from years ago where the guy put his finger in the wound and he could feel the defect in the artery. Is it better to just leave your finger on that and not pack the wound?
At that point, if you know you're controlling the bleeding, just leave it there.
Yeah.
Because it won't take you any pressure, right? You're on it. Like a femoral artery here, to push through all this tissue, tendons and all that, it's a lot of work to get to an artery. Most of us, it actually hurts to find your femoral artery realistically. So to apply enough pressure to do that. Now, if it's opened up and you can feel that, yeah, plug it. I mean, you'll see docs, if we have an open jugular, they'll just put their finger in it and just go to the OR that way. So that brings us back to a story of a patient probably 2 months ago, sawing wood in the woods with his dad. He's 18 years old. He's a lefty, so he's holding the saw backwards because it's a righty, and it bucked. And he got up and it hit him right in the neck, right? Cuts right through. So he's bleeding out. So his dad literally takes his shirt off, packs it in that neck wound, holds pressure, takes him to the hospital. Kid gets there. They're transferring to the trauma facility, our facility, and the doc says, put some quick clot in it. So at the hospital before they ship to him, they pack it full of quick clot, continue pressure all the way to one of our hospitals, and when they get there, bleeding was completely controlled. Okay? So that kid is now alive because of his dad's steps. Now, his dad has never been through stop the bleed. Common sense, right? I'm going to put pressure on it. So he's probably had first aid of some nature. So he just applied that concept. So if you want to know if quick clot works, though, to stop an arterial bleed or a jugular vein, it's a pretty big deal. So it does work. And those of you who have messed with quick clot before, it's different now than it was in the military days, like when it looked like gunpowder pouring in, that felt like gunpowder burning too. This is an inert mineral called kaolin, and it's very unique because it is kind of a clayish mineral that just kind of helps accentuate your clotting factors.
Can you cut that and pack it up a nose?
Absolutely. That's kind of what I was saying, that we can talk off camera with lots of different uses.
Is the quick clot in the little plastic bag pack?
It can be, but then your cost goes up. And that's where I say, you have to look at what you really want versus what you don't want. On the bottom of that card, there's going to be one at the very bottom called stopbleedingkits.org, and her name is Benita. They have a whole website. You go on there, you kind of find what you want. If you're looking for specific ones, he's looking for certain ones, they'll build you kits so they can build it so that it's how you want it to be built, and then they can package it that way. But realistically, most of their kits come with Celox, which is a hemostatic agent. So this kit that's $70 from them, basically almost the same kit with the Celox, is only $50. And I'll give you a code for 10% off through her too, okay? So direct pressure, pack the wound. Any more questions on the wound packing? We're going to practice it. That's why we're kind of going through that, but we'll get hands on. Go ahead.
So you buy one of those kits, how long do they last if we don't use them?
Great question. North American Rescue right here on the front of there says expiration date none. The reason being is do we care if it's sterile? We're not looking for sterile. We're looking for stop bleeding. And so that's kind of why they're able to get away with that. Now, we are having this issue inside of hospitals because we have to deal with JACO and DOH and CMS and all these other facilities where they come through. Now, different companies, this one, so like training, this one says training use only non-sterile. But there's another one by the ones that we're putting in the hospital. They have a 10-year on their kit. Oh, well, actually, no, this is a 5-year. But why the kit's failing is not because of anything in there except for the gloves. So nitrile gloves have a shelf life of about 5 years, and then they start to break down. Now, I think if you have them in a kit like this where it's constantly getting air, you probably might have that issue at 5 years, right? But most of us have gloves at our house that are older than that, and I mean, they still work-ish. Oh, absolutely, and I can tell you right now that every rep that I've ever talked to, this and that, they're not allowed to tell you that you can use it afterwards. But if you ask them if it works after the expiration date, it works, but they cannot tell you to use it after the expiration date. But they'll all tell you don't get rid of it, if that makes sense. Because it'll waste, it's a landfill. You don't want to fill those landfills, right? Okay. But the point being is it does work, use what you have, but no, realistically, that's the whole point of this. The one reason that the hospitals aren't putting Quick Clot in there, Quick Clot does have, once again, that 5-year shelf life on it. So we've opted to actually take this kit, take one of these, tape it to the back, then put these in our kits in the hospital, and then in 5 years, we'll take this off. You'll get a discount buying another one if it's unopened. You get a 20% kind of a buyback rate. So you put this one in your pocket, and then you get another one at 20% off, and you put it back on the kit for 5 years, and then you have this for your personal kit at home. I'm gonna have a lot up in 5 years, guys. Just keep me in mind, all right? So, realistically now, what we're gonna talk about is just the last little bit, and it's probably about 2 or 3 more minutes. Kids, right? We don't want to talk about kids. No one wants to see kids get hurt, right? 25% of all mass shootings and active shooter situations are happening in K through 12 school at this moment in time, all right? It is frustrating because my 11-year-old daughter came home the day they were doing the memory for the 17 Florida victims. So at her school, they stopped for 17 seconds for a moment of silence. So my daughter comes home and she says, "Dad, I don't want to get shot at school." But personally, I don't want my daughter to get shot at school either. So I told her it's never going to happen. I'm lying because it could. But the odds are still not there. How many million schools are not having a problem when this one active shooter situation is happening? So the fact that we're scaring our children, it does bother me a little bit because I'm okay with them being prepared, but I'm telling you right now, they'll probably attest to you in the back, the schools are having more active shooter training drills than the police departments and the fire departments and everything else are. And that's a little weird to me. Because realistically, what's an active shooter drill for in a school? Is it for the kids or the teachers? So realistically, the students don't have to be scared mindless. We can just kind of, because what are they going to do in an active situation? The teacher's going to say, "Get in the corner, be quiet, and sit there." And they're all going to just be like, you know, I mean, that's not, you can't train for that. You can't train to sit there and shut up. The kids with ADD are going to talk no matter what. It's just going to happen. So the point being is this is happening everywhere, and we just need to be aware of that. And so if you have a kid in front of you, you treat it the same as an adult. They're just tiny, right? So if I put a finger in a wound, it's a lot different than a finger in a big thigh, right? I'm going to be touching bone. I'm going to be right there the whole time. So you just have to be aware that it's smaller. The issue that we run into is tourniquets. This tourniquet, we said, works on big people. Does it work on little people? Depends on how little. Who's little in here? She's right there. She's tiny. Might not even work on here. I'm not kidding. Let me see your arm real quick. You in the beautiful lavender right here. Just want to see. Okay, so her wrist would be fine. If you have really tiny wrists, maybe we'll look at it in the back. The point being is they don't work because what happens is you get so small that the plastic here is not bending and actually creating that circumferential pressure anymore, all right? So tiny little kids it doesn't work on. That's where we get to the other style of tourniquets. This was invented actually to work on canines in the military. But realistically, the reason being is dogs' leg shapes are different than humans, so they created something that would work, but then realized that it had pediatric application and a lot of other applications. So treat kids the same. Infants are very small. Realistically, I can, not his arm, but realistically, if this was the arm on a child, I can create almost enough circumferential pressure to actually stop the bleeding just by being its own tourniquet, right? So on a little tiny infant, just put your arm around their arm above it and just squeeze. And you can probably do it, or put a little gauze on there. It's really a lot easier on them. The problem with they is how much blood do they have to lose? Not very much, right? I mean, when we're phlebotoming a little kid, you're like scraping the foot to get a couple of drops of blood out of there, right? So we realistically just remember that. For the large, deep ones, same technique as you would for an adult. If you get something in you, you chose to treat someone without gloves, you had gloves on but they tore, right? In an active shooter or any kind of situation where there's glass around, odds are they're going to get torn. So if you do feel like you got some sort of cross-contamination of blood or something with a patient, know who it was that you were working with. Let EMS know. EMS can then track that person's history. They can test that patient, and then they can let you know. And if nothing comes back, then you don't have to go on prophylactic drugs like the past. You can wait a little bit. But if they find out, we can treat you, and realistically, you're pretty good, right? I mean, just a statistic right off the top. HIV, how many people in America have it? It's not that. It's high, but it's not as high as people want to think. I know he doesn't, okay, right? So JD has HIV, right? And I rub my blood in it like that. I still have a 1 in 300 chance that I can even contract it, direct contact, direct blood, direct eye, whatever, from touching someone who actually has it. Then you take the factor of how many people actually have it, and you kind of multiply those out. It's very low risk for what you're actually doing. And don't get me wrong, paramedics happen. They get stuck, they get hep C, they get things. It is a risk you take. But it's a risk you take if that means something. And we're in a church, and so I feel like a lot of people in here would take that chance. So I appreciate what you guys do. All right. So ABCs, that was a slide. ABCs, what's A for? Alert. B? Find that bleeding spot. And what's C? Compress. Okay. So it's doing its own thing. The card that I'll give you will have that last slide on there, bleedingcontrol.org. That is the main company right here that is working through with the government on this. They're kind of the go-to people on bleeding control as far as the classes and things like that. So if you go there, you can find kits. Now they sell these kits on there too, but there's no discounts. The ones that I give you there, I've already created some sort of a discount or worked out something with these people so that they will give you the hospital pricing. So if you really want, if you're looking that route, that's going to be your cheapest bet. This just shows you a few of the kits if it goes to it. Next slide. Does it work? Okay, so these are the kits we're building. Go back one more. There we go. What? Yep. So these are some of the small kits. This is what Quick Clot would look like if you had it in your kit. A basic kit, all you really need is the tourniquet, set of gloves. I prefer to have a compression bandage because ultimately most of them aren't always going to need a tourniquet. So having a compression bandage will at least hold the pressure there so you can do what you need to do. And then the Quick Clot would work very well for the other situation. These are what we're building. He's going to build at Olympic College, but we're building for the hospital. Basically, you mount the kit on the wall. You put 8 individual kits right inside of it. And then at the hospital, if there was an emergency with no people there, or at a federal firehouse, or in this church, or something happens, you go pull the handle, grab a kit. You can run and go do what you need to do and leave the other ones there. So if someone else needed to grab them and go, and it gives you that option of this. So realistically, that's all that the kits are going to have in them. Go ahead next, see if it works. Is that it? Okay. So the point being is alert, bleeding control, compression, nothing's changed. You're just adding a little bit of tools to your arsenal. Pack the wound, put the pressure. If it's in a junctional area, try and use a hemostatic agent if you can. If it's on a limb or an arm, use a tourniquet. If you're going to use your own tourniquets, practice with those tourniquets. But realistically, most of you at this point in time, if what you're doing is emergency management, you should at least have some sort of a tourniquet in your arsenal.
As Austin, awesome job, pointed out, one of the things that causes us to need to know the Stop the Bleed training that we just received is that unfortunate situation of an active shooter. And so the way this is going to go, we are fortunate to have with us this evening from Lacey Police Department, Officer Fichik, Officer Parker, and Officer Berry. And they will be answering your questions and sharing with you following this brief 9-minute video.
A morning that began like any other turned tragic today when an employee opened fire on his supervisor and fellow coworkers.
Students, parents, teachers are asking why today after a bloody rampage plunged this campus into tragedy.
Details are just coming in, but we're being told that a heavily armed gunman opened fire this evening at the mall food court behind me. There's no official word on any casualties yet, but one eyewitness reported seeing at least 6 people shot.
Active shooter. A gunman or gunmen killing or attempting to kill people in a confined, populated area.
You gotta get some sleep. You're looking like a vampire.
You sleep. You ain't got no babies at home keeping you up.
What the hell? Ah, Sim again.
We've tried. I'm sorry. We're gonna have to let you go.
Active shooter killings are a tragic, unpredictable reality, and one that's becoming more common.
Since 2006, the U.S. has averaged an active shooter event with 4 or more deaths every 2.9 months.
Even though the number of active shooter events has been increasing, your odds of being involved in one are still very slim. But just like fire drills and earthquake preparedness, making a plan in advance can make all the difference.
Yeah, but lizards live in tanks. I mean, it's probably fine.
If you do find yourself in the middle of a senseless attack, the why doesn't matter.
Hey. Hey, buddy.
Hang on, something's happening.
What matters is surviving.
On average, 20 mass shootings take place in the U.S. every year.
Killers usually choose their victims at random. They look for easy targets. So the harder you are to see or to hit, the safer you are. When an attack starts, if you can find a way out of the location, do so.
Get out.
If you stay calm and think clearly, even in the middle of a life and death event, you improve your chances of making it out. Visualize your movements in advance.
What are we gonna do?
Look at me, look at me. I can get us out. Stay behind me. Stay down.
Use cover, something that will stop a bullet, and concealment, something that at least keeps you out of sight.
Attention South LA units, code 3 response needed regarding a 245 DSV 417. To be at the town center shopping mall. Suspects wearing a face mask, possible body armor.
Use any available means to get out, including emergency exits or windows. Most restaurants and retail locations will also have exits in the back, through kitchens or stock rooms. Even in the best cases, police are minutes, not seconds away. You must take action to protect yourself.
Okay, everybody stay calm. It's probably just a drill.
No, go back, go back.
Oh my God, come here.
If you can help others without putting yourself in unnecessary danger,
It's gonna be okay.
do
It's
so.
gonna be okay. What's your name?
Lori.
Lori? It's gonna be okay.
If you can't move safely to an exit, get to a room or a confined area you can lock down. Then secure the location.
Secure your location.
Oh my God.
There's somebody shooting.
Everybody stay calm. Remember how we train. Everybody get in this corner, away from the windows. Get the emergency bag from my desk. Help her.
Drywall won't stop a bullet, but there are steps to take to stay safe. Lock or barricade the doors, turn off the lights, move away from any windows, and silence your cell phone.
The other door doesn't lock. Move desks or anything, just block it.
A modern emergency bag can include a first aid kit, gloves, emergency plans for the building, and casualty cards to alert first responders to any wounded victims.
Most active shooter situations are over in 10 to 15 minutes.
Attention Lakeway units, code 3 is needed. Red 245 GSV 417. It's going to be at Alexandria College. Multiple victims down.
Law enforcement's first responsibility when entering an active shooter situation is to stop the suspect, not to render aid to the victims. Medical teams will enter the scene as soon as the suspect is no longer a threat or is confirmed in another location. Silence any cell phones and remain quiet. Do not alert the shooter to your presence.
Sheriff's Department, is there anyone inside?
Red card.
Just hang tight. We'll be back to get you.
Defend yourself.
If you cannot escape the location and you can't shelter in place, you may have to defend yourself as a last resort. Almost anything can be turned into an improvised weapon. Look for something that can disrupt the shooter's ability to see, breathe, or control their weapon. When law enforcement arrives, they are going to be in a heightened state of readiness and awareness, looking for any aggressive movements. So keep your hands visible and follow any commands you are given.
He's a shooter.
What happened? What happened?
Oh, it's just a shooter. I just saw one shooter.
Especially in developing situations, engaging law enforcement, running toward them, reaching for them, even to thank them, could put people at risk.
Surviving an active shooter.
Anybody injured? Two up front.
For more information,
Thank you. Seriously.
visit activeshooter.lasd.org.
So you introduced us earlier, but I'm Officer Fichek with Lacey Police. A little bit about me. I've been there for 8.5 years now. I am a DT instructor with the department. I'm on the Thurston County SWAT team, and I'm currently an FTO. With us right here is Officer Barry. He's somebody I'm training right now in the FTO process, so he has come out and enjoy this, this speech and kind of see what we do in law enforcement as well.
And I'm Officer Parker. I've been with the department for about 10 years. I'm also with the SWAT team, a master defensive tactics instructor. So we teach police officers how to defend themselves, and I'm also a tactics instructor. So I'm one of the instructors that actually teaches the police officers how to respond to an active shooter situation.
So any questions for us about the video or about our response or what we do in an active shooter situation?
I guess we'll start with this. How many of you all have heard of this concept from the video? Okay, so a good number. How many have not? Okay, so what that's called is what they call it is run, hide, fight. Is the is kind of the principle behind it, and so kind of the concept that came about. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do things in that order. It's kind of dependent upon what type of environment you're in. So whether you're in a church, whether you're in a school, a movie theater, a business, that's all going to kind of determine. It's going to be environmentally specific. So the basic concept is if you can escape a building pretty readily, then you should do so. You should exit the area. You should escape, run, and seek safety. To elaborate on that, they tell you in those trainings that if you can take people with you, take them with you. If they want to stay, then don't argue with them. You have to get yourself safe. You have to take care of yourself first, and lead others out if they're going to come with you. The next step is the hide portion. So if you are not able to escape and you're in an area where it's not safe for you to do so, just like the video showed, turn off the lights, try to make yourself, like the hide and seek game. Try to barricade the doors if possible, and things like that. So what they're teaching in schools is just like they do earthquake drills or anything like that, fire drills. They're teaching kids in school to, if we do a lockdown, we're going to shut off the lights, close the blinds, and all that good stuff. And they're teaching them to barricade the doors. There are some products out there on the markets. I'm sure a lot of you all have seen those on social media of ways to kind of lock a door or to barricade a door. There's always something new coming out. But the basic gist of it is just to barricade the door with what you have: chairs, desks, anything like that, bookshelves or anything like that. Can you hold this for me real quick?
Mm-hmm.
While we were watching this video, there's a few of these videos that are out on the internet, on YouTube and things like that. So all of them have the basic principles, but some of them elaborate a little more than others. I saw you guys did some first aid training. They talked a little bit about tourniquets and stopping the bleed and stuff like that. So that's going to be really important as well. I took a couple of notes while we were watching that video just to kind of jog my memory. So one of the things we want to talk about is we're talking about principles of before, during, and after an active shooter, right? So what are some of the things that we can do before? And they kind of said in the video, just to get some audience participation.
At my church, we discussed amongst the staff the concept of operation. How are we going to get out of here? We were concerned about a particular individual coming to our location, and he had a criminal record. But we talked about how we were going to get out of here and be safe and get help.
Right, so you game planned it like you would a fire evacuation drill, an earthquake drill. It's the same kind of thing. It's unfortunate, that we should have to do that, but you should always be prepared for anything. Some of the other things we can do is looking for suspicious activity. If you're showing up, so for instance, if you're showing up to church and there's somebody that had an issue in the past that's kind of on our radar as, somebody that may be a little unstable or something, needs some help. If you see that person acting in a way that's alarming, then you should tell someone. Don't keep it to yourself. Because and it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be blown out of proportion, but when you keep things to yourself, it may not raise that level of suspicion to the point where some people could be alerted and you could potentially save lives if that were to happen. Some of the other things to do is to get in the necessary materials you have on hand. Most places you go have the defibrillators now. So that's just kind of, the way first aid is kind of trending. One of the things that we do is we all carry a tourniquet on us. So just like they talked about, every officer now carries a tourniquet somewhere. And that tourniquet is to use on ourselves. If we were to respond, I would use his tourniquet on him. I also keep one in my police car and in my personal car. They're not that expensive, and so it's just nice to have. And then the thing folds up. You can put it in a pocket. You can put it in a purse or anything like that. So that's just something for you to prepare for before. During is the run, hide, fight, like we talked about. Just knowing those concepts and knowing what you would do in one of those situations. And then the after. So they talked a little bit about law enforcement response, okay? So when law enforcement initially responds, like they said, it's within minutes, not seconds. Depending on where it's at, there could be an officer that just happens to be there coincidentally, but still, the bulk of people are going to respond within minutes. If there is a situation like that, they're going to respond in force. There is going to be a ton of police officers there from everywhere. The North Thurston incident that we had there, you had off-duty, officers responding, plainclothes officers responding, State Patrol, Lacey, Tumwater, Olympia. You had DOC, FBI, you had all kind of people because there's these different offices all around. So when they hear that call come out, everybody's responding out there. So just know though that if law enforcement responds, the initial responders are not, like they said in the video, are not going to render aid. That is one thing that they're trained not to do. So they are trained to kind of, I guess to kind of block out what's natural for us to do. Naturally we want to help people, but they have to block that out and they have to step over people to go and prevent any further deaths from occurring or injuries from occurring. So that's where all that first aid and everything comes in, and something as simple as rolling somebody over to their side is greatly beneficial in that. One of the other things we want to address is people will always say, well, I carry a firearm, on myself. I'm a concealed weapons carrier. Well, that's great, but maybe for the fight portion, if you had to get down to it, yes. But there's other potential issues with that. They tell even us, when you're off duty, if you're off duty at the movie theater and there's an active shooter situation, you really, really, really have to think about how you respond to that in plain clothes. Because me as a police officer, if I respond to an active shooter, there may be a description, but most of the time, most of the information coming out, there's just a floodgate of information, and there's probably a million different descriptions because everybody's reporting different things. So when I show up, I see person with gun, I'm gonna assume that is the threat. And we are trained to kind of pick out a threat and to kind of, evaluate it as it comes. But that's not always necessarily the case when you're talking about a situation like this, in which you got a floodgate of people running at you, and now you see a guy with a gun, and you see people running from that direction. So everybody can see the potential issues with that. The other thing is the potential for, collateral damage. Right now, if I was in plain clothes and I'm up here addressing, and then there was an active shooter that came out of that door right there, everybody stands up. If that's the threat, where's everybody going to run? Probably going to run that way. And so if I'm trying to address a threat there, I got all these people, in my line of fire. So just be aware of that. But those are some of the things that jogged my memory and jogged my mind when I was watching that video that I wanted to elaborate on. You guys have anything?
So what if this person's that close to me and I pull my gun and I shoot that person, which is for you, put my gun down?
So, and you've thought about it. That's great. Yeah, you've thought about it.
I won't pull the trigger on the side.
Right.
And I'm not going to shoot across the room and across the table. I've done enough training. But this person's close enough, I know I can shoot him. He's already hurt other people. We're all scared. It's a threat on our life. And if I shoot that person, obviously you don't know that I'm not the shooter. I get that. But if I take that gun, put it down.
Or holster it.
Or holster it.
Reholster it. And when you're contacted by law enforcement, let them know, hey, I am armed.
Right.
So we're aware of that. You're probably going to be disarmed, probably.
Of course.
But as long as we arrive on scene and you tell us that you're armed, we're aware of that.
Right.
So we can address that issue right then and there.
So that is a great plan. And that goes back to where I said, run, hide, fight doesn't necessarily have to go in order. If you're close enough that I'm here and now somebody starts shooting, I'm in fight mode. Because there's no way I'm going to run and survive that. I'm in fight mode. I'm going to fight with as violent as I can to survive that encounter. Which is, like you said, you pull your gun, you shoot, and then once you do that.
So I don't believe in it because I get what you guys say. We're here to take care of people and we want to help them.
Right.
So I'm definitely going to shoot people in the back. But here this guy has shot everybody. He's backing up to me and the group here. I have the gun. Am I going to prison because I shoot him in the back if that's what it takes to stop him? That shoot will stop?
No, ma'am. And we're always careful in answering those type of questions.
I know that's illegal.
But I can. No, I can give you the legal answer to that. So, because people always try to paint us in these corners, like, what if I did this? So, but no, that's actually a myth. That's actually a myth.
I don't want to put myself in a legal matter for you guys, and I know that the law states that you're only to shoot somebody that if you feel in danger for your life. Well, if he's facing that way, well, I'm not really in danger at that second, but he's already killed 10 people.
Well, you are. Yeah. You are, and that's the articulation portion of it. If you can articulate that person is a threat to your life or someone else's, that is legal. Shooting someone in the back is a myth. It's all about the articulation. And the laws on deadly force says that, one, if the person is a danger to others or to you, you can use deadly force. Two, and just like police officers, we can use deadly force to seize or capture somebody that has committed a crime involving the infliction or threatened infliction of great bodily injury or great bodily harm. So that includes shooting someone in the back. If we responded to an active shooter situation and that person is now in the parking lot, say they're in the parking lot, we address them in the parking lot, now they're going back into the building where we know people are, then I have no other alternative if they won't stop other than seizing them with deadly force to prevent the potential loss of lives back in that building. So you have to articulate it, but that's a great question. Yes.
So one of the reasons we started these workshops like 12 years ago is that to help churches be prepared. And so if they wanted to form plans for their congregation, like in the county we do lockdown drills, schools do lockdown drills, would their local law enforcement be a good resource for them to go to kind of talk about what would be the best way to go through the church, see where would be a good lockdown area?
Absolutely.
Especially when there's children.
Kind of like us here today. It's probably because I'm in law enforcement, but even whether I'm going to church or a movie, I always talking to my wife and having a plan. So like, for example, here, there's 5 doors that you can get out in this building. So that's the first thing I look at when I walk into a room, or what are my exit points? And then I start thinking in my mind, okay, what if the shooter comes through that door? Where's my fastest exit point? Or start picking doors where they're going to come through. So always formulate that plan. When I go to movie theaters, I look at all the exits and I sit close to an exit. Because if something happens, I can get my family out as soon as they can out that door. And if obviously I'm armed, I'm going to address that threat. But always choosing the quickest route to get out of a building. For example, in this one right here, like I said, there's 5 doors in here, so you guys have to look in, pick and choose.
But we're always a resource, and so we have a position at the Lacey Police Department, the anti-crime officer, who he deals with a lot in the community. He goes to HOA meetings, he talks to people about crime prevention and things like that. He's a great resource. He'll actually come and do some small seminars such as like this, talking about lockdown drills and things like that. If you contacted any agency, they would point you in the right direction and get somebody out there to talk to you, kind of like how they asked us to come talk to you today. So yeah, we can kind of do a site survey, kind of walk around, tell you, hey, these are some points of vulnerability. You may want to think about having some first aid here, not just for active shooter, but for other things and stuff like that. Yes, ma'am.
Say about the red card that was slipped under the door.
So that, I'm not familiar with that. That's something that I think in that jurisdiction that they kind of put together. So we don't really have anything that's a standard procedure for that. Usually we'll identify ourselves at a door, because there's what's called an active shooter and then an active shooter gone static. So as you saw those officers initially responding, their job is to bypass, anybody that needs aid, they bypass them, they address that threat. The follow-on officers that arrive, we here in our jurisdiction, we train with the fire department. Before, it used to be that the fire department will not come in until everything is totally cleared. Well, we've, over the last, I think, 9 years, we've kind of started building that relationship and having them out there for, for training with us, that we now bring them in so we push initially through, and then we have them come in and start to triage and treat people and evacuate people. So after everything's gone static, we will go room by room and we will search under everything looking for anybody that's hiding. Because technically you should be hidden so well that we have to scour and look for you for hours. I went to a Sandy Hook debrief where the law enforcement that responded to that were talking to us, and it was hours later that the detectives were there processing the scene, that people were still coming out of hiding, out of copy room doors and cubbies and stuff like that. I mean, they were hidden so well that they wouldn't come out. There was a teacher that barricaded herself into a room, and even though the police were identifying themselves, she still would not open the door. They slipped a badge under the door or a business card, and she still would not open the door. She said, well, if you're the police, you can go get somebody with keys and you can open this door. So I mean, and that's just, that's the level of scrutiny that you have to have.
I'm not sure I have a question, but can you comment on the strategy that I've read about many people survive because they play dead?
I mean, I get it. I get the concept behind it. Me personally, I think you run a greater risk of maybe not surviving that contact if you were to just lay there versus trying to hide. I guess that's a form of hiding. If you feel like you can't fight your way out of that, then maybe you go back into hide mode, and that's an ingenious way to hide, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah. I mean, if I know physically or mentally that I am not prepared to take on that person in fight mode, then I guess that's your only alternative is to hide in plain sight. Yeah.
I can only imagine being in a church if there's an active shooter and I have children in the preschool or Sunday school activities, and I want to go get my child.
Right.
So what's the plan? What's the best?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one. So that's always one of the main issues with school shootings, is not only are we dealing with everything that's going on and happening currently, even when it goes static, all the parents are trying to show up and they're all trying to get their child. They want to make sure their child's okay. The thing they talked about was silencing cell phones. You're like, it's very important because every parent's going to start calling their kid. And the last thing you want when you're trying to hide is your cell phone going off. So one of the things that we do is a reunification area. Those that are evacuated, and you just kind of, I guess you got to put faith in whoever is there that's in charge of the daycare, that they're going to do what they need to do to protect those kids. Kind of like I said with that teacher that would not open the door until they opened it. You have to put your faith in that person, and also that they're trained, well in what they're doing. But once we get people evacuated, one of the first things we do is establish a reunification area for any loved ones and parents, loved ones, to when the evacuees come out, so we can reunify them, because that's just a troubling situation. It's hard for you to sit there and not know what's going on.
I can't imagine fleeing without my child.
Yeah. And just like with us, it's really tough for us in training when somebody's grabbing on your pant leg and you could save them. I could put a tourniquet on them. I could stop the bleeding, but I can't, because I have to go and I have to deal with what's going on. So it's just like that. It's just you have to make some of the hard decisions. Yeah.
You keep mentioning static. What exactly does that mean?
So that's when they're, like they said, most active shooter situations only last 10 to 15 minutes. I think in recent times it's even shorter than that, because most of the active shooters that happen statistically, once law enforcement arrives or is responding or someone starts to fight, that person either flees or they take their own life. Static is that portion afterwards when there's nothing else going on. So even if I'm sorry?
So it's after you've secured the suspected shooter.
Right, so that just means that shooting has stopped. So, and truthfully, most of the time when law enforcement arrive, the shooting's probably already stopped. But that does mean we still have to go in, we still have to try to find out where that shooter is, secure everything, and then we don't start searching rooms and everything until everything is totally secured, and we'll do several searches, methodical searches. Yeah, that's what I refer to as static. Any other questions?
I have a question. Sure. The last shooting that happened in Florida, the guy put down his weapon and everything as the response for going in, he walked out the door.
Right.
You can have the same thing in a church environment when you exit. As you coming in, they going out. So did that recourse or training came to that, to how to respond to that? Because I've seen everybody, if they running in, and all these shooters not high on something, some of them are actually smart. And they see that happen, and they just put their stuff down and walk away with the people in here. What to keep them from getting out, since I seen it, but if that was in a church environment, that'd be very hard when you got 100 to 500 people coming out, and a lot of people fit the description of the active shooter.
Right.
Going out the door. So, and based on, let's say, an area that's close to an interstate highway and other multi-routes to get out, that person actually got a lot of time to get out of the area while you still cleansing and going through the process of searching in other areas. How is that going to make the community feel good and happy about the response that comes when actually take care of that person not going to go out and continue to go on, and because they think, well, I got a way on continuing on with whatever that's going inside my mind to keep going with that.
Right. I don't know if you want to.
I mean, it's difficult because, I mean, the information that we get when we are responding is just from our dispatch. So if we're getting reports of a certain description of somebody, when we arrive on scene, we're going to be looking for that description. So whether you're the shooter or not, you could be detained by us because we don't know. Until we can prove otherwise, then you'll be detained by law enforcement. But again, the only information we can rely on before we get there is descriptions and the information provided by people that are calling 911. That's what we have to go off of. And obviously, if we arrive on scene, we see certain things, now we're forming our own opinions about what's going on. But before we arrive there, it's all what is told by dispatch.
And that's actually what happened in the San Bernardino terrorist when they had the shooting there. The guy actually left and was going out of the parking lot when the cops were responding because they didn't have a very good description. But there's a silver lining to that. The silver lining is they're now no longer hurting people. Yes, they're in the public, but now you have to rely on your detectives and everyone that has that expertise in tracking down who that person is and getting them detained. But our initial response is, hey, we want to make sure no one is actively getting hurt. And if that's the case, if they're gone, no one's getting hurt, and that's what we want. Sir.
So, what are some specific behaviors to watch out for to identify a possible threat?
Shooting at you.
There's so many when it comes to mental health, and that's a whole nother can of worms. But I would say someone that isolates themselves, someone that's just not acting. If like San Bernardino, the gentleman there, he was always kind of a lone wolf, kind of a, hey, he didn't necessarily socialize with the rest of his coworkers. So it wasn't odd. He was just the odd guy all the time. But the day of the shooting, he did some things that were still way out of the ordinary. He sat by himself at a Christmas party all the way out. He wouldn't talk to anybody during that. He had a bag that he wouldn't leave. And then he left the building, but left the bag sitting there. He just did some things like that people later on were like, oh, that was suspicious, and then they pieced it all together later. That's really one of those questions that we really couldn't answer. It's just all the different signs, I guess, when it comes to mental health or things that just don't seem right, I guess, that kind of make...
Are there any, basics?
I really couldn't give you a specific answer, I don't think.
I mean, it's so broad. I mean, like, look in the video. A guy gets fired and he turns into an active shooter. It's anything can set anybody off at any given time. So, I mean, I think, like I said, isolating maybe somebody that's acting out all the time. Like, say you have somebody in your church group or part of church that's always acting out. That might cause alarm to some people. So when they come into church next time, you might keep an eye on them a little bit more. But again, it's so broad as far as what sets people off. It's hard to pinpoint certain behaviors that could happen. So.
Great questions.
Is there anything that can be done if you see somebody that you know they're mentally unstable and now they're acting really weird? Any intervention that can be done to sort of de-escalate before things happen?
Yes. The biggest thing I think is just to dialogue with folks and talk to them.
Be nice.
Yeah, you know, it's unfortunate that, I mean, there's not a whole lot of budgeting for mental health. And we deal with it all the time, and you know, we're all trained. We have to go through 40 hours of crisis intervention training, and then we do a 2-hour refresher every year now, according to state law. And so even the training that we have is still difficult. I mean, when someone has mental health issues and you're not necessarily classically trained and, you know, a doctor or a mental health professional, it's just hard to do. I mean, you can have certain things to do to talk to people to try to de-escalate them, just to bring them down a little bit, but that's a really tough thing to do, I think. Yeah. Any other questions?
You said something that's very important, especially in the church environment, because you're not trying to look closed off and cold and alienating. So you have a lot of people coming in. So you said, get to know them, observe any pattern, watch them. That's what we do at our, because we have a very low population. So we watch them, and you keep our eye on them. Watch them they're not on their meds, watch them they're agitated, watch how they come in the door and they greet the scene and stuff like that. That's basically what you can do, because you can't really lock down the church. Because it's supposed to be inviting for people to come in. So that's very hard what you said. So you just got to be observant and always be attentive to it.
Well, and to go off what you say, don't be afraid to tell somebody. Most churches have security teams for the most part. Don't be afraid to voice up and tell, hey, this is what I see, this is what I observe, so you alert somebody to this activity. And if it's repeated activity happening all the time, then now your entire security team, whether it's at church, wherever you're at, is alert to this person every time they come into a facility.
It seems like in this day and age, it's never amplified that this is a very low risk, you know. It's not, you know, it happens, but it's still not. I mean, I get struck by lightning, I take more chances driving. It seems not to be, because there's all this fear of everything happening, you know. I like to amplify that. I don't walk around scared. There's a lot of other things, normal things I do. And that statistic up there, does that include like home invasions where families get murdered? Is that incorporated? It's not just school shootings, it's everything incorporated together, right? That statistic.
I can't speak for the statistic on the video. I don't even know where that video came from. There, like I said, there's a lot of them out there. But usually most statistics that they have, they're talking about the traditional active shooter type of, I don't want to use the word
when it says 3 or 4 or more, I've heard that statistic is lumped in with like people murdering their families.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
That was an LAPD.
LAPD.
LA
Sheriff. It was LA Sheriff.
LAPD, it said,
Yeah.
yeah, it was from LA area.
Right. So yeah, I don't know where they got their statistics from. Yeah. So like I said, there's lots of statistics out there, and then you know about statistics. They can always be skewed. So yeah. But I mean, those videos are actually really good. Like I said, just because we knew we were coming, so we got ourselves familiar with a few of them out there because we've seen them before. There are some of them that are a little hokey. They're just kind of like, yeah, they really didn't give me much information. This is actually a good one. The one by Houston, I don't know if it's Houston PD. It's actually a really good one as well. So just some of those things that you can talk with your families about. And like you said, that doesn't mean that you have to walk around scared and walk on eggshells and things like that. It's just like if I prepare at my house for a fire, the chances of my house burning up are probably not very high, but I'm going to be prepared for it. Same thing with an earthquake. So I equate it to that. Just be prepared because predictable is preventable, right? So I mean that doesn't mean to say you have to walk around, in fear.